Hi everyone, welcome back to Dad's Planning Politics. Hello, Mr. Mark Phibbs, how are you doing?
Hi, darling. Well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just, heading around, hearing horrible news from the internet every so days about the state of the world. But aside from that, I'm doing okay. So it's nice to be back on here to chat with you again after a 2 week kind of break. It feels now that we've switched to doing bi-weekly. It feels like there's not as much time that we see each other.
No, that's true. That's true. And given you're in Canberra and I'm in Hong Kong, we are not seeing each other for a few weeks till you come back to Sydney. But today we're going to have an exciting episode or interesting episode. We're going to first look at Sudan and some of the terrible atrocities happening there. We're going to look at the latest implications of Prince Andrew and losing his title. And then we're going to look at the latest issues in terms of climate change, a few things, the terrible impact of the hurricane in Jamaica. We're going to look at the fact that the Nationals are going to drop their net zero target for 2050 and the latest climate report from Australia to end up the podcast. So it'll be very interesting. So should we start with Sudan?
Yeah, definitely. Let's get into it. So, a little bit of background context for those who don't know. Sudan has typically had a long history of civil war. I think the previous civil war that they had going on ended in the 2000s. Then there was a period of unrest where hundreds of thousands of people were killed by the leaders at the time. Rapid Support Forces,
Forces.
they're a paramilitary group which are incredibly dangerous. The Biden administration, when they were in power, they accused them of genocide because of the mass atrocities they have committed. They have killed mass numbers of people, innocent civilians, just in their campaign for taking over various areas of Sudan. Their main goal is to have total control over Sudan. Obviously, there's a lot of other rebel groups that are resisting that, and a lot of ordinary people who are resisting that as well because they don't have the people's human rights in their heart. They don't seem to care about that. There's also been occasion of mass rapes and plundering, which seem crucial to their military campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues. At the moment, it's the world's worst humanitarian crisis, which is really saying something considering everything we've seen in Gaza. But that's a little rundown. What do you have to
It
say on this?
it's fascinating here because the head of the military and then the rapid support forces, they years ago used to work together, but they have different views of the future of Sudan. And so the challenge is the RSF brutal people, as Freddie's just spoken about. They've just taken over the city of El Fasher in the Darfur region. And so it's just shocking what's happening to the civilians there. You know, their vision of Sudan, either scenario is pretty bad, what the vision of Sudan is. So it's a terrible situation and doesn't get a lot of coverage internationally, right, with all the other things going on in the world, which is why it's so important for us to raise this here with people. And in fact, one of our listeners raised this with me to discuss this as well as you, Freddie. So, an important point to talk about in terms of Sudan. And the challenge is how do you have a United Nations force or any other country to get involved in this and do this with all these other issues happening around the world and the lowered strength of the United Nations given their lack of funding, et cetera, over the last year or two.
Definitely. I mean, that's a really good point to make. I think the world was already very precarious a few years ago before the UN started to lose all its power and before international law started to lose all its power. It was still weak in comparison to like domestic forces. There was barely anything it could do. It could put out arrest warrants, it could try send peacekeeping forces, but it couldn't completely take control of a country. It couldn't complete a transition to power in a country. It was limited, but now it's even more limited, right? Because they barely have any funding, and it feels like the world is just sitting back and watching as these atrocities continue. I also think it's an interesting point you said about how, it hasn't been covered in traditional media. I wonder why that is. I wonder if the rise of far-right extremism and this, xenophobia, right? Really reflecting in on your own people and caring about what's going on in your own country, all associated with the cost of living and internal pressures, means that we don't seem to care about people who are on the other side of the world as much as we would have in the past. It was almost a
Hmm.
luxury that we had the time to look abroad and see what was happening there and try and weigh in on it. And now it feels like we don't have the time and or money to be doing that. Or the media doesn't seem to care about it in a way that they used to.
I,
Because
th-
yeah, sorry, you
I think
continue.
it's a great point you make because I think everyone's been given permission to be more selfish than they would have been in the past and just be concerned with their own issues and
Mm,
put that out of their mind, these things happening. Particularly, I would contend in Africa. Africa's always been the place where people expect this sort of stuff to happen, which is
yeah.
atrocious, and therefore it's a lower order than what's happening in Ukraine or what's happening in Gaza, etc. But one interesting thing that would be interesting to explore is China's investing big time in Africa with their Belt and Road Initiative, more than anyone else. But when does China ever get involved in any of these conflicts to save people? They don't really. It's all about economic growth and economic prosperity as opposed to any
Mm.
sort of moral leadership. But it's interesting because they are espousing to be more of a model leader in the world recently, with the aberrant ways of the US. So if they're really going to do that, they're going to need to get involved in some of these humanitarian crises at some point. If they truly are going to be a world leader, or whether it's just window dressing, who knows? I don't know what you think about that.
I think this is a whole other point, and I will definitely go into it a little bit, but maybe we can even save more of this for another episode so we can get through all the topics we have to say. But yeah, I think that this is a really important point. I think that your idea of what a world leader is, unfortunately, I don't think that really exists anymore. I think that when the US was the world leader, the hegemon, the great power, I think that they assumed this responsibility of some kind of global police force, and maybe in some ways they were trying to benefit the rest of the world and try and, help human rights across the world. I also think a lot of it was to their own benefit, by securing peace in countries that are on the other side of the world. To you, it does secure peace in your own country. Um, just that process of if people are happier, they'll be less willing to start civil war, less willing to start conflict. It won't affect the supply chains. It won't affect terrorism, etc. So, the US had a policy of trying to maintain peace in order to really help themselves as well as helping the world. But now I feel China understands that peace maybe is not realistic. And so instead of trying to protect people's livelihoods, I think they're just trying to protect industry and their economy. And I don't know if Sudan is crucial to Chinese economy. I don't think that the RSF is powerful enough for China to feel threatened by them. So it's simply something that's going on in another part of the world that they do not need to interact with. China will
Mm.
have the power regardless of whether they help out on a humanitarian front because they have the economic power. And in the world that we live in, unfortunately, I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, very true. So, yeah, we may explore that in a future episode if people are interested in it, because it is an interesting thought that's
Definitely.
happening. So, I don't think Sudan's going to be resolved anytime soon. As you pointed out, Freddie, it's been going on for years. And it seems that people just want to try and rule in their own right. I mean, it seems
Mhm.
very unintelligible to me because clearly there's big forces on both sides. You would think you'd come to some sort of compromise scenario here if you were intelligent, but that's not the way things are.
I mean, I suppose that's what's happened when you get rid of the rules-based order, right? When you get rid of a scenario where, because I don't think democracy is innate to like humanity. I don't think we are born willing to sort things out through a democratic way. I think we like to fight. So democracy is this brilliant thing that we came up with in order to bypass all the fighting and bypass all the violence. But I think, unfortunately, if you don't have the right institutions and you don't have the right people willing to push democracy, then you end up in a situation where it becomes civil war and it becomes almost tribal groups and paramilitary groups fighting against each other with mass murders of innocent civilians as a consequence of that. And that's kind
Agreed.
of the world seems to be reverting to, it feels, at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's true. And then the analogy here is the EU, how that stopped any wars happening in Europe up until, Russia invading Ukraine,
Exactly.
for since the Second World War. That institution and that rule of law has played its part, right? So it's just an analogy of that. Let's change our pace to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Um, the the fall of a prince, Dufresne, the woman who was
Giuffre.
allegedly accosted, Dufresne, Dufresne,
Giuffre
Dufresne
with the G.
was was accosted by Andrew some years
Accosted.
ago.
She claims in her memoir that he raped her 3 times, twice when she
Okay,
was 17, and then once later on because she was, sex trafficked by Epstein, and she
Epstein, yeah.
was Epstein's main accuser. But that's yeah, sorry, just to I'm in here with my
Um,
own.
so Andrew, as just some background, has led this very privileged life and is, on all reports, is incredibly arrogant and entitled and was the favorite of the Queen, and has been bailed out many times, to the tunes of millions of dollars. Often was not very nice to household staff in the palaces, etc. And on all reports, is not very well liked by other members of the royal family and the
Yeah.
staff, etc. But this is an incredible fall from grace. So losing all titles is going to be moving out of Windsor because Kate and William and family have just moved to their forever house just 2 kilometers from where Andrew's been living. And so they don't want, I mean, this is an existential threat to the royal family, right? It reminds me of Princess Diana's death and public opinion getting out ahead of the royals reacting to it. It's great what King Charles has done in terms of Andrew, but he's behind public opinion on this because it took him a long time. Because you can imagine for a brother to do this to his own brother is a really hard thing. Okay.
Mm.
Um,
But can I
so
can I jump in there? I think that, that's what makes him different maybe even to Queen Elizabeth, because I don't think that she would've taken as long. I think that her commitment to the royal family and the monarchy in general is so absolute to who she was. And, she stripped him of his military medals as soon
mhm.
as Virginia Giuffre even accused him. She stripped him of his military medals like that. She didn't wait for the verdict or anything else to happen. She decided that that was the time to move and that was the time for action, and it has taken Charles a long time, whether that's because it's difficult to remove royal titles or whether that's due to his own, confusion on the matter, we're not sure, but he
Or
is.
loyalty to his brother.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
this is true, but the media has tried to skew it that he is not loyal to his brother and that he has been wanting Andrew out for a long time. The BBC and the British media has tried to say that. Um,
So, they're dealing with this because Andrew will move to the Norfolk estate, which is called Sandringham, which is a huge estate, and that's owned by the king. And in fact, it was bought to put Edward VII there to deal with another problem in the past with the royal family. So it's become the place where you send problem children of the royal family, right, to out of sight, out of mind. It's a huge estate. Andrew will be given a place there. He'll get support from the king, but no public
yeah, apparently the
supporting.
king will be funding him still,
Yeah, he
his
will. He will.
livelihood and his rent, which doesn't feel like he's really alienating him from family life at all. I mean, I think we have to remember this is a man who very incredibly likely has raped a child
Mhm.
multiple times, at least one child, and that's really horrific, and I think it does poke a lot of holes in the idea of the monarchy, because the idea of the monarchy rests upon this age-old tradition that they are some higher form of being, right? Who deserves to be in a place of power and deserves to, direct the people who live under them to a better life or a better way of living. But if one of those people is doing such horrific, disgusting things, it really makes you think, are any of these people in the royal family worthy of the position that they're in? It's I understand why they're scared because they should be.
Well, I think, look, it raises that quick. That's why you've got to, it's having a bad apple in the barrel. You've got to get rid of that bad apple or infect the whole barrel. And that's clearly the thinking of the royal family here. The advantage of Norfolk, where Sandringham is it's rather isolated, 160 kilometers or something from Windsor. It's owned by the king, so nobody can complain about taxpayers funding Andrew. You
But
know,
where
he's
does
going to
the
lead.
king get his money from?
He's one of the wealthiest people in the
Where
UK
did he
through
get it from?
all his land holdings throughout
Yeah,
the
where did
UK.
that come from?
History, darling, history.
From the people. From the
So
people.
the question is, so you're right. I mean, he's supposedly Andrew has lots of friends in the Middle East, been offered a palace in Abu Dhabi, etc., etc. That's also an alternative, right? The question is, I don't think this is really going to go away. Now that Andrew doesn't have protection of royal titles, he may well be subpoenaed to appear in the US. And who knows how bad this could get for him? Might end up in jail or wherever. So incredibly damaging to Andrew, of course, and the royal family. And, it'll be fascinating to see where this goes. And, you know, you think about the human cost of all this on the victim's case side, and as well as to the royal family and stuff. It's pretty sad and tragic.
I mean, it definitely is. And this is a little bit more of a conspiracy theory opinion I have. I think I've decided I'm gonna start clarifying that before I say some of my more um radical, I suppose, opinions. So then people who are listening understand that I don't truly believe this, but it could be a reality or it could not. So this is a little bit of a theory, but I know that Virginia Giuffre did come out a few times on social media and said that she is in no way suicidal. She made all these statements about, wait, I'm gonna cut this part out. I just need to see. How did she die? Because I'm pretty sure people said that she committed suicide.
She did commit suicide, yeah?
Okay,
That's
yeah,
what the
okay.
Australian
Well,
authorities said.
let me check.
In Australia, in Western Australia.
Okay. Um, so all of this information came out from Virginia before she died, and she said, I am in no way suicidal. If I die, people should look into that and people should ask questions. And this is a tradition. A lot of celebrities or people who are very controversial in public opinion have done this recently. And then, yeah, she did seem to die by suicide. So again, that's a very messy situation there. We don't know what truly happened. But I guess this is my reminder to question what's happening out there, question what you hear, question what the media is telling you, question even what we are telling you, and go, how did she really die? And what are the results of this case going to be? Because obviously Epstein and Prince Andrew, some of the most powerful people in the world, and the people who are on the side of Prince Andrew don't want to see that information get out and don't want to see him put away in jail. So it's a
True.
interesting thing to
It
kind of pay
is. It is.
attention to, I
It
would
is
say.
an interesting conspiracy theory. I haven't heard her brother or siblings mention that at all. And for that to be true, Australian authorities would have to go along with that because she died of suicide in Australia, and that was certified by the coroner in Western Australia. So if your theory is correct, all those people would have to be going along with it, which I find hard to imagine would be the case.
Okay. Yes. Well, it's just an interesting thing. It's happened a few other times, so just something to keep in mind. But
Anyway, this has all come to pass because her book has been released,
yeah,
obviously after
posthumously.
her death. and so all this is in the book. So yeah, tragic um, situation, and the response from the royal family was, I think, very good from a communications point of view, saying, we're thinking about the victims and our concern is for the victims, and so it's very good because Camilla actually works with female victims of domestic violence, etc., and violence, sexual violence. So I think from what I read, she was a big proponent of Charles to take action on this as well, because how could she be leading such a cause? The other interesting aside here is Eugenie and Beatrice, how they handled this, because they still have their princess titles. And how do they handle it, right? Because just think from a human point of view, this is their parents. Do they break off relations with them, or they just go dark in terms of coverage, etc.? Do they still go to the Royal Christmas at Sandringham? Who knows? So it's very difficult for them as well, you can imagine, from a human point of view.
Yeah, but I feel like you're even saying it still from a royal responsibility point of view, like really from the human point of view. Like Fergie has admitted to sending money to Epstein. She's admitted to being aware of what was going on. These are these two women who know that their parents were involved in a child sex trafficking ring. I mean, psychologically, that's really difficult to come to terms with, and it must have affected them in some way. And I hope that in some world, they're getting therapy and they're talking about it, or maybe it's made them have some pretty strange opinions and thoughts as well. I really don't know enough about it. But for a woman to be in that position, knowing that your father had done something so atrocious and disgusting, it would make you rethink everything that you believe in.
Hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, you don't wish anyone to be in that position. And it's definitely going to be very difficult. But to move on, I think to move on to a different topic, because this one is a very doom and gloom. The next one kind of is too, but like this one is particularly doom and gloom to me, I feel. Um, Let's move on to what has been happening in Australia, and we'll talk about Jamaica as well and Hurricane Melissa, but really climate change and the updates politically on how our two main parties have been dealing with climate change and the climate change targets, etc.
First,
Yours.
first of all, Melissa, the worst hurricane to ever hit Jamaica and the Caribbean. I mean, just devastating impact there, and also in Cuba as well,
Yeah.
and just terrible stuff. I mean, for countries to recover from this is really, really difficult, right? They need a lot of help, etc., to recover from this, and it's difficult. I mean, Jamaica's not incredibly poor, but they're not that wealthy either, right? So, it's a real challenge.
And I mean, as well, this is just another one of those instances of Jamaica is not a country who has historically had much to do with climate emissions. Like they're not a great exporter of coal or oil or anything like that. And yet they are now being targeted by climate change. So the actions of, the US, China, Russia, Australia as well have now affected Jamaica in a massive way. And these people have just gone about their lives, and now the effects of something that's completely out of their control have, destroyed livelihoods. So I think it's a terrifying position to be in. I think it was a Category 5 hurricane. The last really atrocious one that hit Jamaica was a Category 3. This was said to be one of the worst storms to ever go through the region, let alone just the country, but one of the worst storms we've ever seen. So obviously praying for everyone there and hoping, the community will band together and find some way to restore their livelihoods in that way. But it's difficult when you don't have, aid from other countries, or if you don't have anyone even working towards fixing climate change. It just all gets a bit depressing.
It's very true. So on the back of that, you have the clowns in the National Party having their conference recently, saying they're walking away from their net zero target by 2050. So more chaos in the coalition. You've got Barnaby Joyce not attending the meetings because he wasn't in favour of net zero, but there's issues beyond net zero with him because he's thinking of joining One Nation. Um, It's just, for me, it's crazy because what they're trying to do is move to more of a right-wing stance to become a little bit like reform in the UK. And the challenge from a climate change point of view is countries are losing momentum on this. Their argument is, why should Australia be ahead of the pack in dealing with climate change? Let's just be in line with China and the US, et cetera, and not be ahead of that because it will deindustrialize our economy. And it's an interesting argument because if you think about Tomago, which is the largest aluminium smelter in
Pepperly.
Australia, aluminium smelter in Australia, they're saying they're going to need to shut down unless they have certainty of power costs because power costs are way too high in Australia, right? In the next few years. So that Tomago smelter is 4% of our emissions as a country, or they use 4% of the energy of the country. So it's very, very significant. And of course, you don't want the country to completely deindustrialize. That would be crazy when that industry would go offshore to China. So that's the big policy question. Freddie, I don't know what any thoughts you have on that.
I mean, as you probably guessed, I have a million thoughts. I have so many thoughts. I think that, you know, it's taken a very long time for us to get to this point. Australians, they say that we are ahead of the curve. We are not. That is based on per capita, so that's per person. Australia, as I'm sure all of you listening know, has a very small population compared to the rest of these countries we're talking about. So actually, per person, we do have very high emissions still. We do. And I'm going to ask you again another question. Listeners, are we really comparing ourselves to what the administrations of the US and China are doing right now? You think that the leadership we have is the same as the leadership that they have over there? And also, it's all well and good to ask these questions about protecting one industry in our country when the national climate risk assessment that the government orchestrated, so they put a lot of money into it, got a lot of scientists, experts in their fields, expert academics in their fields to do this risk assessment on how it would affect Australia, not how climate change would affect Jamaica, not how it would affect the rest of the world. Purely from a selfish point of view, how would it affect Australians? And if you read what they found out, it's really horrific, actually. So some of the statistics that I have, just a few, feel free to take a look at the risk assessment because it's really quite interesting, but quite horrifying as well, is that more than 1 million Australians will be exposed to rising sea levels by 2060, more than 1 million, as in they will have to move and relocate. That's a big percentage of our country. By 2050, the cost of disasters that are created by climate change, so worsened hurricanes, worsened flooding, worsened bushfires, all of that is expected to cost over $40 billion to the Australian economy. 40 billion, which is obviously a massive amount. And that's the lowest amount that it will cost. That's the minimum cost of climate change on our country. And then you're also going to look at it like there's going to be severe threats to water security. Food prices are going to go up, up, up to unprecedented levels. And there's going to be a 400% increase in heat-related deaths. If you look back to some of the heat waves that have been happening in Sydney and across the country, recently there's been a lot of elderly people struggling with the heat and unfortunately dying and overtaking hospital rooms. And this is going to increase by 400%. So I think we're at the point where it's not the time to be like children in the playground and to be arguing about whether climate change is real or not. I think that it's time to decide, do you believe in it or do you not? And if you believe in it, you really have to get out there and start making a change because expert climate scientists and scientists across the world, including the late Jane Goodall, believe that we have crossed too far. Emissions have gone too far. They think that there is no turning back. We have reached the 1.5 warming worldwide that scientists have been warning us for since the 80s will be an irreversible turning point in the Earth's climate. And we've reached that. And is this ringing alarm bells across the world? Not as much as it should be. So
Agreed.
I get tired talking about whether one company is going to go under when we're talking about the fate of the human race itself.
Mhm. No, no, I agree, Freddie. I mean, I think the majority of Australians agree with that. We need to go as fast as we possibly can to renewables. We need to investigate over time these small nuclear reactors, etc., in order to provide the level of power that AI and these aluminium plants require. Okay, and we need to give assistance in the meantime to help with this transition. I think the stance of the National Party comes from a point of fear. In the past, that's how they've won elections, etc. And the sad thing is, it's the tail wagging the dog again with the coalition because the Nationals are actually rather small, 4% of votes, etc. And the Liberal Party is larger than that, significantly larger, like 20% or something. But, you know, this is a big threat to Susan Lee, the current leader. But I just think the coalition is making themselves even more relevant because I don't see a full right wing party
Irrelevant.
taking off,
Yeah.
irrelevant, taking off in Australia because of our compulsory voting. I think it's a very different scenario to the UK. But I just feel like it's a waste of time with so many issues in the world. You know, it'd be nice if people get on with things and just work on the things that are going to be impactful rather than trying to take us back to the 1950s.
I completely agree, and I love how you ended that. I'll just add one more thing as well that I thought was interesting that Chris Bowen said, because, obviously the Labour government has things to work on too, and Chris Bowen
Sure.
does too, but he said interestingly in response to David Littleproud's announcement, he said, "Regional Australia has the most to lose from the effects of climate change and the most to gain from taking action." And that's really true. I mean, you look at the cities, you look at, like, the wealth balance, you look at regional Australia and suburban Australia and think that climate change is going to affect everyone, but it's going to disproportionately affect regional Australia. And why it's almost offensive and disgusting for the people who are representing regional Australia to be so against, um, protecting them and so against
Hmm.
protecting their livelihoods. It's just
Yep.
not realistic, to what's the right option to take. But yeah,
But you know, they like these climate wars, right? I mean, the tragic thing happening I was reading about in the country today, anyone who's putting wind farms on their farms, they're being ostracized by their local communities. Their kids are being bullied in school and that sort of thing because of people feel like that's an evil thing. This is what this whole climate wars has done. It's a bizarre scenario of
it
what's
is
going on.
bizarre because any of you like listening as well, if you think that wind farms are evil, why? It's not affecting you. Like you're not having the wind farms on your land. Does it really affect you if someone else is doing that with their money? That's a strange thing to be getting mad about. There's so many other things going on. But I
That's
think
true.
that's almost a good close to our episode today. Maybe you guys take some time, go on a walk, connect with nature again, because there's a lot happening in the world right now. And I think we got to stick together, got to have some hope every now and again, I would say. I don't know what you want to add to that.
No, it's a great way to finish. Great chatting with you, Freddie, and
Chat
thank you
with
for
you as well.
listening. And we'll speak soon. Bye.